Ag Life, presented by ADM Lloydminster.
Hello again and welcome to our agriculture show Ag Life. I'm Gerard Lampow. On the menu, Canadian beef is on the move in Japan. Plus, in License to Farm, we hear more on consumer challenges and why do you need a transition team to pass on your farm legacy? But first, canola trade with China is closed and even the back door is shut. I got to hear the lobbying cry from a producer group ahead of seeding season. As canola trade is stalled with China, on March 29th, Federal Ministers Carr and Bibeau met with ag producers in Saskatoon. The Agriculture Producers Association of Saskatchewan asked for federal support as the industry's cash crop is in crisis and seeding season is about to get underway. A month later, that file has not moved.
We're continuing to hold the government's feet to the fire. Elections are coming in October, all those kind of issues. We're lobbying as hard as we can.
APAS President Todd Lewis, who farms near Gray, Saskatchewan, is remaining upbeat even as China has stopped future canola contracts with Canada.
We've got a good product. We've got, probably the best system in the world as far as having good quality canola, knowing what we ship over there, pest-free, disease-free, all those issues. So we're hoping that if it is science-based, that we can fix that quickly. And unfortunately, if it is a diplomatic solution, it's going to take longer.
When they met with the federal ministers, APAS asked for support to deal with market issues, adjustments to the agri-stability programs, and Saskatchewan crop insurance.
Producers need to have some kind of comfort that there is going to be some support and that our government are working hard to remedy these situations and be able to ship our canola across to our customers.
APAS is continuing to knock on Ottawa's door to roll out support for the canola industry. The current crisis has shown the need for more medium to long-term support programs for ag producers. But while the conversation will stay science-based, the standoff with China is concurrent with issues beyond the canola field.
It's a long way from the farm gate. We can't control that. That's up to our federal government to deal with this.
And on May 1st, the federal government rolled out support for farmers to help them out with the cash flow. The advance payments program is now up from $400,000 to $1 million, and the interest-free portion of that is up from $500,000 to $1 million to offer farmers better cash flow to see through this crisis. Well, still to come, Canadian beef is on the move in Japan. Do stay with us.
This segment of Ag Life is brought to you by Webb's Machinery. Webb's Machinery, your New Holland dealer in Vermilion, Vegreville, and Lamont.
Welcome back. The demand for Canadian beef is strong at home and abroad. Let's find out why the quality product is on the move in the Asian jewel.
On day one of that agreement, we got nearly a 12% tariff reduction in what gets paid on our Canadian beef.
John Maswell with the Canadian Cattlemen's Association is upbeat as the new deal with Asia is up and running and Canadian beef is poised to make real inroads in Japan.
Just the first couple of months in since the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trade Partnership in the Pacific, came into effect.
The trade deal is rolling out tariff reductions, which will put Canada on a level playing field with other beef competitors like Australia.
We're paying 38.5%, and now we're kind of down in the 26% range. That's margin back on the Canadian side.
Maswell is excited by the potential of new markets opening up for Canadian beef. Japan is a leading world importer of meat with a $9 billion market in 2017.
All about who can pay the most and contribute the most profit. Japan, it's like an extra 12% on top of what we used to get. I think that's why you're going to see a lot more of that product going into that marketplace.
Japan's meat imports for January 2019 was 3,545 metric tons, more than triple the volume of the previous month prior to the Asian jewel lowering tariffs on Canadian beef.
Early numbers for that first month of January, they were up five-fold from the same January the last year. When you add the offals into the equation, so cuts and offals altogether, we're up about triple on the total tonnage.
The cattle sector has at least one more reason to be bullish.
I think we had, all through the TPP negotiations, said that we thought we could easily double our trade to Japan and maybe even triple it. I think once we get a year's worth of data in there, we'll kind of see how good we were on making that prediction.
And when we come back, we'll return to License to Farm for the interviews dealing with consumer challenges. Do stay with us. Welcome back. This next segment comes to us from Sask Canola. License to Farm tackled the hot-button topics facing agriculture, and we're also sharing the interview segments. So here's the one dealing with consumer challenges.
What we put in our bodies, what we choose to buy in the store, it's wrapped into our identity now. We're starting to see the pressure that this increasingly, urban consumer can really exert on our producers.
Especially these days when there's so much controversy about many nutritional issues and many farming issues. People are confused, they're bewildered, they don't know who to listen to, who is correct. Relatively, until recent times, until 70, 80 years ago, 70% of the population was somehow involved in farming. Today, it's less than 2%. 2% of the population is providing the fantastic amount of food that we enjoy. Well, that obviously had to come about with some innovations in technology.
There's concern about GMOs, about genetically modified organisms, mostly because people don't really understand what they are. And certainly there is concern in regards to the use of pesticides, whether they be insecticides or herbicides or fungicides, in that I think consumers in a lot of ways sort of don't understand why they're necessary. There are very few emotions that humans have that really make us want to act, and fear, that's one of them. If we're reading things, and especially as a mom, or if you're making decisions for your family, and you see something that's alarming, it's natural, I think, to want to err on the side of caution.
A lot of the activists, who promote what I consider are illegitimate fears about our food, do it very well. You have to give them begrudging respect for their activism. They come out with very romanticized arguments, not scientifically based, but very, very compelling.
Things like the anti-GMO movement or the move to regulating pesticides, it is an incredibly large and powerful group. With every sort of added regulation or policy that gets put into place based on consumer concerns as opposed to scientific concerns, we run the risk of moving towards the point where the practicality component gets taken out entirely. What we have is good. We're doing good things. What is really important to me is where this technology is going to take us. Things like using less water to produce the same yield, using less nitrogen to produce the same yield. These are the sort of traits that I think resonate with consumers.
So I think it's very important to point out to people the difference between scientific knowledge and hearsay and emotion and the all-knowing they say. Well, who is the they? It is not the people who are doing the legitimate research in that area. We
live in a world of very quick snippets of Facebook posts and Twitter handles and 140 characters and tight headlines, and we skim. We don't really read. We don't necessarily think super critically or question where the information's coming from all the time. There are things that pop up on my feed that I really want to say, did you even look where this came from before you hit share?
And I think it's our job in the scientific community to try to counter that, to instruct people on how we in the scientific realm really know what we know. Why should we be believed when we say that concerns about genetic modification, concerns about pesticide residues are overblown, whereas many of the activists maintain that we're inundated with disease and that we are confronting a cancer epidemic, etc. Why is it that isn't really correct, and why should they believe what we say? And I think the basic answer to that is how we know what we know. And what we know really relies on the scientific literature. It relies on what we refer to as the peer-reviewed scientific literature, whereby a scientist will do some kind of study, submit it to a journal. The journal will send it out to experts in the field who then evaluate it and determine whether or not it deems to be published. That's quite different from looking at the Huffington Post or looking at the National Enquirer, or in fact looking at any newspaper, where they are not as meticulous about looking at where the information comes from.
I grew up on a farm. It was all I ever wanted to do. I love animals. I love plants. I'm fascinated by how they all work together and how there's nothing simple about any of it. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I wanted to work with farmers. So ag journalism has become sort of farming by proxy. I get to chase down anything I find interesting. The farmers I know that I get to work with, that I have the pleasure of working with, are incredibly passionate. These are people that are just so down to earth and so connected with what they do. Just because someone is a conventional farmer doesn't mean they're not also an environmentalist. It doesn't mean that a farmer doesn't also worry about the safety of the food that they feed their family. Farmers are also consumers. They make choices in the grocery store just like we do, just like their customers do.
So whenever we look at concerns that people have about modern farming, you have to look at the other side, about what it has allowed us to have, is this vast food supply.
We don't necessarily get that reality check of what it really takes to have avocados in the grocery store 12 months out of the year. The average consumer wants to buy fresh vegetables and lovely produce and the meat that they choose and all these sorts of wonderful things. They want them to be available, but they don't always think about what it took to get them there.
My feeling always has been that high school students should be made to spend 2 weeks on a farm. And then they would realize, how difficult it is to grow food, and how you have to worry about weather conditions, and a 30-second hailstorm can destroy your crop for the year, and what difficulties farmers face.
If you walk into a grocery store, you can see the very real impact of what a consumer demand can do. And you walk in now, and they've gone to sort of a farmer kind of farmer's market food stand sort of look. There's large splashy, be well and make great choices and eat healthy and eat organic. It's everywhere. Now, organic actually has a whole certification system behind it, but we've got all sorts of labels that don't, and they're just marketing.
Of course, there is the romanticized idea that a small farm somehow produces better quality food than what is possible to do on quote, industrial farms today. Well, how do you evaluate that? The only way to evaluate it is based upon the chemistry of the food. You take a look at that pea or that apple that is grown on the small farm. You take a look at the other and see, is there any chemical difference? Fact is that there isn't, because what you're looking at are different production methods, but that doesn't result in a different final product. This is not to decry the fact that organic agriculture can't work. It can on a limited basis, but it's not going to feed 10 billion people who will be coming to dinner by 2050. We have the luxury of worrying about trivia here, certainly in North America, because we don't have to worry where our food supply comes from. So we worry instead about traces of pesticide residues in that food supply. So we need to have, the proper perspective.
We, as a North American or European very wealthy society, are sort of saying, we want this purist ideal, and we really could stop this technology from helping the very people that it really needs to help, those that live in countries that are not self-sufficient, that they don't have food security. And so it's a very, I think it's coming from a place of incredible wealth and privilege to blindly sort of be putting this pressure and digging our heels in on some of this technology that really has phenomenal potential to do so many wonderful things.
Today, thanks to farmers, it is possible to eat better than anyone has ever eaten in history.
Well, we're back out to the feedlot now, and how about that? A concrete floor at the feedlot. This next segment comes to us from the Alberta Cattle Feeders Association. Let's see how that floor upgrade is working out for the cattle.
My favorite aspect of my job is the planning and organization of the day-to-day operations going on at the feedlot. Behind us we have some fly ash pens. It's a new technology that's just come out the last few years, and we've been putting it in because we've been spending so much money on the use of putting in clay back in the pens after it's been punched out by cattle. This product removes that. Rolled compacted concrete is it's a byproduct. It has fly ash in it that comes from the coal plants. When mixed with concrete powder and dry rolled into the pens, it fires and creates a concrete-like substance that's quite a bit cheaper than wet concrete. Will last up to from 10 to 15 years, maybe even longer. It saves on cleaning time. It's very easy for unskilled operator to clean a fly ash pen compared to a dirt floor pen. When you're losing 8 to 10 inches of clay in the wet springs, the environment isn't that great for cattle, and here you don't see that anymore. There's also better feed conversion. Foot health is better in these pens. I think people could use it as a form of dust control. In the dry evenings of this summer, you could look down the alleys and there was quite a difference between our dirt floor pens and our rolled compacted concrete pens. We're expecting that it could be a 5 to 7 year payback compared to putting in dirt or clay into the pens.
And when we come back, transition team, why do you need those trusted professionals to successfully hand on your farm legacy? Do stay with us.
Ag Life, presented by ADM Lloydminster.
Well, even at the best of times, starting a sordid conversation like estate planning is difficult. I find out that when the stakes are so high, you need to have a plan in place.
One of the questions was, well, how much does it cost? One of the biggest things is to start early. You do see a lot of primary producers that they're focused on the farm, and that's a good thing. They want to grow their business. Right now, it's not enough to simply be an excellent farmer. You also need to be a business person.
Lawyer Tom Hall says you need a team in place to nurture a successful transition of your farming legacy. The danger of not planning ahead is an untimely death without a blueprint for transition in place.
If you don't have a will, there are some default rules that vary province to province regarding what happens to your estate and what will happen with the farm. The biggest thing is you don't want to rely on those rules because they don't always achieve the goals that you want.
For a fair transition to your farming as well as non-farming children, and to ensure the farm lives on, a written document needs to be in place to avoid the farm being left up to the default rules. Without a will, the farm will be distributed by the public trustee.
Anyone who has dealt with the public trustee before, not to knock them, but it is a long and painful process. And there's large fees that are attached to that as well.
Hall encourages producers to hand on their legacy successfully.
You're not doing this, you won't be around. It may not affect you as much, but by having an estate plan in place, you are giving a bigger gift to your family members, to the people that survive you.
It's hard to find a good place to start an awkward conversation. Hall says get a professional team in place and talk about your goals with the people that can help you achieve them.
One of the analogies that's been used is you don't eat an elephant all at once. You have to start with one bite.
The age of the average farmer is 55, and about 3/4 of Canada's family farms are to transition in the next 10 years. Already, the 35-year-old farmer demographic is growing.
It's a massive undertaking. It is a huge transfer of wealth to the next generation. So having the proper plan in place on a small scale will help facilitate that.
Well, it's time now to roll our events calendar. If you want to get in on this part of the show, just email me, glampow@stingray.com. Let's have a look. I'm Gerard Lampow, yours in Ag. Take care.